Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Can everyone hear me okay? The microphone's a bit funny. Yeah, very good. Okay. Congratulations for making it through back-to-back panel sessions all day today. You will have absolutely earned your beverage at the end of today after this session, but it will also be the best and most insightful one you've had so far. So, great things. And well, I'm Chris Kirk. I'm the CEO of Stone & Chalk, and it's my absolute privilege to be introducing and moderating this afternoon's panel, which is all about building the platform to power the next generation of world-leading innovators. Before we do that, I will just acknowledge the traditional lands of the people we meet on today and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I might start by just getting a little bit of a pulse check before I introduce each one of our speakers as to who's in the room for this conversation. Maybe put your hand up for me if you're working in innovation ecosystem development supporting entrepreneurs. Almost all of the room. That is awesome. We can have a very targeted conversation. That's fantastic. Is anyone an entrepreneur running their own business? Okay, about half. Very good. An investor? A few. Very good. Good to see you, Kostya. And what about working in policy, government or entrepreneurial support? A few as well. Okay, fantastic. Well, that hopefully gives our speakers a little bit of context in terms of the conversation we're going to have, because it is a broad conversation today, but it's one that we are really excited to have. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce very briefly each of our speakers, and then we're going to start to jump into content. We've got an hour today, but we're probably only going to take 35, 40 minutes for conversation. The rest will be questions, so please get them ready. Baden's already committed to be the first question just here, so well done, mate. Without further ado, I'll introduce our speakers, starting with Eloise. Eloise is from the National AI Centre. I will let you explain all about her role briefly, but she has a fantastic mandate to help Australia develop sovereign capability in the artificial intelligence sphere, which is absolutely very pertinent to our conversation today. Then we have Tony King. Tony's from Queensland Government. Tony's across a host of things, including the precinct strategy, the various investment programs and platforms, as well as a host of enabling kind of strategic decisions around how the government are thinking about positioning themselves to grow the next generation of innovators out of Queensland. So welcome, Tony. Then we have Incha. Incha is a Kiwi who's just crossed the ditch. We've had to bribe her and beg and borrow and sell the dream of Sydney. Incha has come from a fantastic organisation that she was most recently running in New Zealand called Outset Ventures. For anyone that's been, has anyone here been to Outset Ventures? It is, if you're in deep tech, it's the place to be. Really inspirational and very much the centre of gravity for deep tech in New Zealand. And last but not least, we have Julia Spicer, Queensland's chief entrepreneur. We might talk about what that actually is a little bit later. Also serial entrepreneur from a little town called Goondiwindi, if I remember correctly. Probably 10, 15,000 people in Goondiwindi. 6,000. Oh, you've scared 7,000 away since we last spoke. Okay. And Julia is an ambassador for entrepreneurship, and it's also responsible for thinking deeply about many of the conversation topics that we're going to have today in terms of how do we really reorientate our economies to support future industry development and innovators. So I think we've got a really diverse, great mix of people here today. And without further ado, I think we'll kick off. So maybe we start with an open question. I mean, each of you in probably from different lenses are thinking about this question of, how do we build the platform for future innovators, whether it's in artificial intelligence or whether it's thinking about, opportunities for young people and I guess the population in a place like Queensland. I mean, when you think about a question like that, what does success look like? What are you trying to solve for? Like, maybe we start with you, Eloise. Like, in an Australian context, and it's something like artificial intelligence, like, what is the end game? Like, what are we actually trying to achieve?
Thanks, Chris. I think when it comes to what success looks like for artificial intelligence in Australia, I think we really have to focus in on or building an AI industry in Australia. That we're going to need to do that to really retain the talent and make the most of this wave of AI that's coming through. In terms of, I guess, bringing it back to the precincts and the innovation hubs and what they can do to support that. There are so many things that can be done, I think, and I think a lot of it comes down to making sure that we're really engaging with Australia's businesses outside of the precincts and platforms. These, we have over 2.5 million businesses in Australia, and they're really, a lot of them are really keen to bring innovation into their business and adopt AI. And they're looking to these innovation precincts and looking to us they don't know where to start. So I think, something that's really important is bringing those SMEs and businesses into these innovation precincts and showcasing them, what's possible with AI and with some of these new technologies.
Julia, you probably have an event like this every day where people are asking you, what's the vision for Queensland and what does success look like and where do we want to be? Like, how do you go about unpacking a question like that is so multifaceted and can be looked at from so many different angles and also has to be kind of nuanced so that it resonates for different people?
Thank you, Chris. So I think it depends is a really annoying answer to some of these questions, but it really does. So for me, I think it's around what is your community and who is your community? Am I not on?
Might be the chief entrepreneur, but I can't turn a microphone on. Let me start again, team. So I think it depends on who I'm speaking with and what the purpose is. But for me, it really is whoever is in the room or whoever is wanting to build the community, making sure that we're really clear on who we are doing this for, what is the purpose and what does that definition of success look like. As you said, I come from a small town of 6,000 people. We are unlikely to have a whole lot of different hubs and spaces for individual sectors. There are not enough of us. One person will be sitting in a room talking to themselves, representing a sector. And so individual sector hubs won't work for us. That's really different if I'm sitting in Gladstone or Mackay that are really building and growing a whole industry around decarbonisation and renewable energy. That conversation is going to be different. What they need and what they're looking for will be really different. And so for me, I think it really does come back to us as a community in whatever definition of community that looks like, being very clear on what we think our future is and then what's the role of government or innovation hubs or support to, be the guardrails around us being able to achieve that. Because really what's important for me and how I define success if I'm talking to people in Gundawindi, it's really different if I'm, looking at it at another level. But I think the piece that's important for me is that communities feel in control of their own destiny, and to do that we need to all agree on what our plan is for our future, and then we get the stakeholders around, and government becomes one of those stakeholders. The roles that we have on this panel become one of those stakeholders, and a hub or a space is where we can kind of bring some of that thinking together.
Imche, do you want to share a little bit about your story with Outset and maybe some of the kind of ways that you were thinking about powering, in your case, deep tech entrepreneurs?
It was a very intentional creation, Outset Ventures. I am a scientist, that's why I started my career, but I was always more fascinated by how inventions turn into widespread technological adaptations. And so that's been the through line of my career. Even as a graduate student, I was frustrated with not necessarily having access to the facilities or the capabilities or the tools that I needed to build something in the science realm. And so how we make building a science and engineering startup as easy as starting to build a SaaS startup on your computer was the intention. We started in the basement of an old government research facility that no one wanted anymore. and eventually grew that out to 5,000 square metres of lab and workshop space. We raised a fund, we built an incubation program. But I think it comes back to your point. It was a very intentional community built for a very intentional group of people who wanted to build in a specific space. And so we built the facilities around that. And that's where it starts, with people. But if you're asking what good success looks like when it comes to building an innovation place or a platform, it's about building successful companies. It's as simple as that. Success for us is supporting successful companies being built. I think we can easily get caught up in measures that don't matter that much. Number of events held, number of people on site, when what it comes down to is, are you providing the right connections at the right time? Are you providing access to the tools that allow people to build their companies and make money to be sustainable?
Tony, I'd be interested in your perspective of this, just throwing you under the bus aggressively here, as representing often government stakeholders who will come to ecosystem organisers with metrics, quite frankly, that don't seem fit for purpose. They don't necessarily seem to accurately capture the intention or the aspiration of sometimes the state, but other times in industry, to really transform, what is a kind of multi-generational change sometimes. If you take a place like Adelaide, moving from bloody awesome wine and car manufacturing to the space industry, like tracking events isn't going to get you very far. Like, how do you think about not just success from a state context, but also the translation of that into stuff that a politician would understand? And we've only got an hour, just by the way.
Well, I'm happy to take that question on notice and come back if you want. But look, it's hard. Part of the problem of being in government is that you're benchmarked against other programs in whatever department you're in, and then other departments as well. So ultimately, governments, local, state, federal, have X amount of dollars, and they look to apportion those dollars to programs that they believe are worthy and are a priority. But in saying that, being a priority doesn't mean that it needs to make a profit on day one. It can be a strategic investment. So if I take Queensland as an example, agriculture is very important to our state, as is mining. And I won't speak on behalf of state development or any other department, but clearly policies and programs and, for that matter, precincts that support those industries are going to be very important, and government's going to look to invest in those things, but not invest forever if there's not dollars attached to it. If we can't see value in terms of some sort of return. Now, I did say just dollars. Part of the reason I said dollars is I was having this debate with some people and talk earlier. In Australia, we're in a very good employment position at the moment. There seems to be lots of jobs around. Under the current definitions of employment, we're not far off full employment. Traditionally, governments have looked at things like innovation places and startups, etc., and said, how many jobs does it bring in? That's a measure we can equate across multiple industries. But it may not be the right measure right now. There may be other measures that are better.
Yeah, Eloise, I'd be interested in your opinion on this. I mean, AI changes everything, every industry. I mean, the ChatGPT moment over the last year has, I think, really just opened up people's minds to, the speed of technological adoption. And I think it's a really interesting shift that we're seeing in terms of the speed at which businesses can now be created, but also this recognition that for Australia to be relevant in industries like AI, we need to be thinking radically differently, and to an extent, place matters less, I suspect. But I'd be interested in how you're thinking about, using the AI sector's hat, building that platform where Australia has relevance and real novel innovation can have an environment to be created.
Look, I think Australia is in a position where we have such unique we're unique geographically. We have such unique data sets. When you look at our population, it's dispersed. We have an ageing population. We've got this, really unique data around our health system. We've got, uniqueness in our mining and our energy, and also in agriculture, etc. So we really have an opportunity to potentially focus in on, building novel AI that really, supercharges those industries and makes, the most of our sovereign data in those industries as well. We want to hold on to that data, I would have thought, and use it for the benefits of all of Australia. So if we can actually, work together to support entrepreneurs and to create AI companies that leverage that data and leverage those industries, then we're going to be in a really good position in terms of the AI race. And I think it's really about focusing in on some of those key industries.
I think it's been interesting over the last couple of years, in particular, the move both from a policy but also from an ecosystem point of view. It's almost been a maturing of, when Stone and Chalk started in 2015, it was very much about physical place, right? It was about bringing people together, it was about culture, and it was about having this almost, we called it a centre of gravity for these fortuitous connections to happen, right? Fast forward to today, and I think partly due to COVID, but also due to the nature of some of these industries, potentially some of that's changed. Like, I know, Tony, you're thinking about the role of multiple precincts, for example. Julia, you speak a lot about regional entrepreneurship. It's an open question, this one, but I'm interested in people's perspectives around what's next. Like, are we moving to platforms to support, innovators who are trying to solve really difficult challenges? Does that detract from maybe some of the efforts that we've put into our precincts and others elsewhere? Like, I'm not sure if Imcha or Julia, or you've kind of got reflections on this as we think about, like, how do we scale our impact?
Yeah, I think that access to information or education is no longer a competitive advantage for innovation places at all. If you're determined enough, you can learn everything you need to know about starting a business online. I think the thing that cannot be replaced and never will be is the human connection. It's the knowing who to go to, whose opinion you trust. It's about having personal mentorship. It's about having people in your industry that you know and trust and can use as a sounding board. That cannot be replaced, and I think that's part of the role that innovation places play. I think the other thing that we'll continue seeing is the development of specialist places. And so we're seeing this pop up with Greenhouse in Sydney or CoLabs here in Melbourne, where there is a specific focus on green biotechnologies, and that is what those spaces are for. And that will continue to evolve, as we're seeing with National AI Centre. So those are my 2 cents, people and specialisation.
If I can add, so definitely Imcha's comment around, it's humans at the end of the day, and I think this event is a good example where, what we've seen happen through COVID, but also in areas with lower population, is these communities of practice. It might be Stone and Chalk Lot 14, or it might be all of South Australia, depending on whatever size we've got to get to, whatever scale we've got to get to get the population density to be able to have those conversations and connections. And so I think, we often talk about the hub and spoke model and everybody coming back into this central place. And from an Australian perspective, that often ends up being the capital cities, and it might be similar for other countries in the room. But what we need to actually start to do from rural and regional areas is talk about the spoke and spoke. So do I need to go back into Sydney to be able to go back out to a regional area in New South Wales, for example? And so how do we get regional areas working together without needing to find that point of all people in the cities? So I think that's one of the pieces, is how do we get regions working better together without needing to come to some sort of mothership central city-based space is one of those, because there's commonality and connection within the communities. The flip of that is at some point, as much as I think Gundawindi is the centre of the universe, I need to go to a bigger centre, yeah? And so how do we help people do that really quickly? Some of the research of Chad Renando, Chad's a bit like Madonna these days, you just need to say his first name and we all know who we're talking about. But his research shows it takes 2 years longer and $150,000 more for a regionally based startup to be able to hit the ground running, because we don't have the networks that we'll find in an Adelaide or Sydney or Melbourne or wherever else in the world. And so for me, I think there's absolute value in the regions coming together, and still we need to quickly get those connections. We don't have the time or the cash for people to be kind of flailing in the regions without knowing how to get them connected in. For two reasons. They may have the solution to climate change, world poverty and all of the rest of it, so we need that to get to light really quickly, or we need to save them some time and some cash and help identify that idea is never going to be commercial or never actually going to be able to get into market. And so I think our spaces are incredibly important in the regions to be able to help people get there. And then it's about at what stage do we need to tap them into the Eloises and the Imchis of the world when they know that they know that you exist and they know how to help get you there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Out of interest, we've got a room full of ecosystem developers here today. Who here thinks they either feel like they come from a smaller ecosystem or one that experiences this challenge where you've got to deliberately design for access to expertise, talent, capital that's not in your physical geography? Out of interest? A couple? So the rest of you have got it all sorted at home. That's fantastic. Yeah. We just came from a session which was all about entrepreneurship in small cities, and it was incredible. We had people from Algeria, all around the world, right? And one of the things that was really interesting is probably people's realisation that you can't, not that you just can't do it all yourself, but it doesn't make sense to do it all yourself. And then this almost kind of organic self-organisation of, to your point, MJ, okay, well, why am I here and what do I focus on?
Chris, can I just touch on that? I guess I just wanted to be maybe the devil's advocate a little bit from a government perspective. So precincts and places are really important. There's no question about that, and I'm not disputing that for a moment. But if I pick up on some of the things that Eloise was saying, so in Queensland, we know we've got about 460,000 small businesses in Queensland. Do we know who they are? No. Do we know where they are? Not really. How do we know that one of those isn't a business with an incredible idea that we need to leverage? We don't. We do need to think about, what's the middle ground here? How do we tap in to that network? And that won't just be in a physical sense. So I don't have the answer, but I'm looking at it from a slightly different perspective to say, if you're in Brisbane, you might go to the precinct or various other places, and we've got them dotted throughout the state. We need to somehow tap into those businesses that don't have that opportunity, and that might be digitally in the first instance, and who knows what that looks like in a few years' time.
Eloise, how's the National AI Centre thinking about that? Because, arguably every business in Australia is potentially a customer or should be a customer of the National AI Centre in some capacity. How do you go about connecting people to expertise and support they need to do exactly what Tony said, ultimately create viable businesses?
Just before I answer that, can I just touch on that earlier topic? The Tech Council of Australia and the CSIRO recently in August just released some research to say that companies in geographical clusters absolutely innovate faster and build more wealth, etc., etc. So I think that's great for everyone that's part of these precincts and these clusters. But it does come to your point that those that are not part of those, the journey's harder. And I think for AI companies in particular, and we're talking about should it be a physical place or is the world it's all going to be online? Well, funny enough, the National AI Centre did also some research back in March where businesses and small to medium businesses in Australia that were looking to adopt AI solutions had to go to up to 6 different solution providers per project to actually be able to implement AI into their business. So if we were to co-locate in these precincts, across the whole AI value chain, you could look at having, you need your computer infrastructure, you need computer scientists, you need data services, data governance strategy, etc. And there's somewhere that you can actually go to get all of those pieces that you need. You're really going to be able to turbocharge and get that innovation into your business faster. And startups are going to be able to get to market faster as well. So yeah, I've now forgotten what your other question was.
Now, Julia is, in full disclosure, been a quintessential entrepreneur today because she has done the ultimate in time management and double booked a panel session, so she's about to run off.
I've got plenty of time, yeah.
Very good.
We will be fine.
Just next door. But Julia, I'd love from you, you've been in the role of chief entrepreneur for a little while now, long enough that it'd be a fair expectation that you have all the answers. And so give us the answers. Like, what are the things that you're really excited about as the next kind of evolution or maturity of kind of enabling infrastructure that supports innovators in Queensland? Like, what are the things that you look at and think about and go, gee, this could really turn the dial?
Purple. No, just joking. That is the answer. So I think for me, it is still coming back to the basics of where are our humans, how are we utilising them, how are they feeling that they are part of some of the solutions in our communities, and how do we unlock that potential in whatever format that looks like. So we are still having conversations about how do we better engage underutilised women in the employment space? How do we help women get back into whatever it is that they want to do, and what does that look like? It always seems to become a woman problem. It's really a community challenge. And so then it's the basics, right? Childcare, different work hours. How do we help people to be doing roles at home or in these hubs and spaces that we're talking about? So I actually think some of the basics we still are at a foundational level still needing to sort. So what I see in Australia, not just Queensland, is we still don't engage women well in the workforce, in startups, in entities. And then we go to some of our other more marginalised populations, which is First Nations, which is people who call Australia or Queensland home now for the first time. So I still actually think if we could genuinely use the people who are able to work and want to work in our startups and social enterprises and not-for-profits, that would actually be pretty innovative, yeah? So I definitely think that's at a foundational piece. There's still some work around that. What I'm excited about and where I see some work happening and where I see the opportunity for some collisions and some mutually beneficial outcomes for sectors that might otherwise have seen themselves quite siloed is around some of this sovereign capability, national security. So, actually ag and defence have got more in common than maybe they might have thought historically, because really what they're looking at is how do we provide for our people, how do we value add our products, how do we make sure that we can access and do things well. So I think we'll start to see some more blending of some of our industries that otherwise might not have seen that they actually had a role to play in supporting each other. So I think that's quite exciting. And I definitely think it's this piece around how are we using artificial intelligence? What does that look like? How does that open up and create opportunities for, for future roles and businesses? I think it's really exciting.
Awesome. So more people in the system, and then almost the blending of, even in Stone and Chalk's experience across, probably 5,000 companies now the last 8 years, the most successful innovators have always been in this weird blurry mix between something and something that you almost can't put your finger on what that is, and that's where the magic is. And I wonder, Chair, in your experience, like so many of the big, hairy, world's most pressing problems that we're all ultimately thinking about, as everyone's regardless of which city or country you hear from today, require deep technical expertise. And so much of that often comes out of a university context as well. It's something, Australia's had, like New Zealand, has had a massive focus on, and there's probably a fair acknowledgement that we need to do a better job around research commercialisation. Like, talk to me about how you were thinking about that and how you get a community of science and kind of deep domain experts engaged in the system, because you were obviously very successful doing that out of outset.
I think that there is sometimes an over-emphasis on that technical expertise than there needs to be. The technological innovation is at the core of a lot of these deep technology companies, but it is nothing without also the commercial considerations, the cultural considerations, everything else that is required to build a technology company. And that's often the part that's overlooked. We so often get excited, scientists coming, getting really, really caught up in the promise of their technology, and they want to see it happen, but they don't necessarily have the patience to learn everything else that is required to build a company. There's sort of this resistance to anything that is the commercial world, that is the dark side. I just care about the science. That's dangerous. And so I think one of the things that we were very intentional about is making business building comfortable and accessible to scientists who are sort of on the academic purist side of things. And again, it comes back to the blend, to the grey areas, to bringing together the academic and the commercial, to bringing together the human and the technical. And so that's something that I spent some time thinking about. I think when it comes to academic institutions who are trying to do research commercialisation better, one of the things that I see commercialisation teams do too often is get too involved in their startups too early with too much process and suffocate the startup in the cradle a little bit. If you're from a university or running a university-associated innovation space, give your people freedom and give everyone on campus the permission to be part of it. It's not just about the engineers, it is about anyone on campus who is interested in building something. And then just allow for a little bit longer than you feel comfortable with. It's about, I think universities have most impact when they foster entrepreneurs and founders and put less emphasis on research commercialization. If you do one, the other will follow.
Very good. I'm interested to jump to AI because I think there's a really, if you were going to pick any enabling infrastructure right now that could really radically transform any industry, it would probably be AI. And one of the magic things I think we've seen recently is the ability for people to just take their really creative best self and merge that with technology to create weird, wonderful stuff that no one would have ever thought of. Like we launched mid last year the world's first artificially intelligence created beer. And that was a bit of a joke at the time, and it tastes bloody good, by the way, you can buy it. But the idea was like, okay, well, how do we just experiment with what's possible and make AI more real for people that would never think about applications like this? And I think I'd love to know, Eloise, like in the opportunity that you've got with something like the National AI Centre that's backed by CSIRO, has great scientific capability, but also has I imagine, a kind of mission and a mandate to really tap into some of, I guess, to Julia's point, a broader portion of the society around, okay, well, how do we help you realise your potential, no matter what that looks like? Like, how do you go about doing that?
Yes, okay, well, as the National AI Centre is actually part of the CSIRO, and we're part of Data 61 in CSIRO, and that's see the technology arm, and there's about, I think, 900 staff and researchers and in that area, and there's over 50 even just on working on responsible AI. So there's a huge amount of research in AI in the CSIRO. I guess as the National AI Centre, though, we're much more focused on commercial. So we're the part of sort of Data 61 that is focused on how we support the commercial sector, current Australian businesses, and also startups. Really make the most of AI. So, but we work closely with those research teams as well. And what we've been able to do is, we've been looking at how we can bring some of the amazing research in AI and match it with some of the startups and the businesses that are out there. But I think what as well, and Lot 14 and Stone and Chalk do this really well. You've got the Australian Institute for Machine Learning on your doorstep there. They've got 900 deep tech AI experts there, and it's joined by a bridge to Stone and Chalk. You're already doing this stuff. There's a huge opportunity there for connection into the entrepreneurs and how to actually get some of this really amazing novel AI out into the world, and then you've got all those startups and entrepreneurs that have the skills to find the product market fit and find the path to market. And I think it is like what Incha was saying, it's really about connecting those two groups and in a number of different ways, whether that's through co-founder matching or there's a number of different ways that can be done. As for us, what are we doing? We're doing a number of things. We're doing industry connection events where we get startups, researchers and industry together to showcase what's possible and try and sort of make commercial connections there. And we're also doing a whole lot of work around providing AI expertise across into hubs, which is something that's coming as well. And so, yeah, and we're also doing a lot of work around how to ensure that those that are creating new AI companies in Australia, that they're doing it in a responsible way as well, and bringing that into the culture. Because if we don't, if we have that has to happen at the beginning. They have to be building, ethical and responsible AI, or they won't be able to sell it essentially. So.
Now, get your questions ready because we're going to open up for questions in just a second. But, Tony, I've got one more for you, and it's completely switching gears, I guess, here. But one of the things that, particularly in the conversation we just had around smaller cities, came out time and time again was this role of kind of like lighthouse projects, like putting a flag in the sand and saying we are going to be famous for and culturally rallying around. And for me, like the such obvious conversation here for Queensland is the Olympics. But I just would love to know, like, are you thinking about opportunities that are coming up and saying, a key part of our strategy is to rally around moments like that? Or
Absolutely. So we're 9 years out from the next Olympics. It gets a lot of conversation. Sports tech is a term that is widely bandied around, but not well understood, I've got to say, because it's so broad. Sports tech goes from everything to do with improving the performance of an athlete to improving the viewing experience from someone sitting at home in their lounge room, and everything in between. So for Queensland, it's a momentous moment. You're mad not to make that a pivotal point, and something to make sure that you leverage in the years ahead, and we will certainly do that. That will be interrupted by political cycles as we go through those over the next 9 years. One thing I want to actually bring back to in terms of precincts and places, though, and Chris, you asked before about what's exciting moving forward. One of the things for me that's exciting around innovation and precincts and places is we pretty well know what works. And for me, what works in a really simple form is collaboration and trust. If we can generate those things in whatever shape and form they need to be, depending on who we're interacting with, we give ourselves a good chance. And I was struck by Mick Fanning's comments yesterday about, moving from surfing into the business world and taking his team with him. And that's all about trust, having the trust in the people around you, moving to a whole different business, but the relationship was more important or as important as everything else, that he needed to learn in that transition. I think that's really the space that governments need to provide and facilitate. So when I think about precincts and places and what is government's role in that is to develop places where people can come together. They can build that trust, they can collaborate on projects, and government hops out of the way.
Collaboration and trust are difficult to foster intentionally, and so I do just want to pause on that for a second because I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Innovation spaces are most effective when they become places where knowledge is amplified and shared. Some of the most valuable lessons that are learned are lessons that are learned from mistakes. And so if we can encourage our people to learn and share mistakes and the lessons they've learned from it, that's hugely beneficial because that means that I don't need to make the same mistake to learn the same lesson. But that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability in that community to be open enough to share that. Sure. And so I think that's where the rubber really hits the road when it comes to building trust and collaboration. It is as people who are in innovation spaces, building these communities day to day, to demonstrate what courage and vulnerability looks like day to day. And that's the responsibility that we all carry.
Oh, look, I couldn't agree more, but it's about relationships at the end of the day. One of the things I'm really proud of that we do in Queensland is we've got a program called Private Sector Pathways, and we often partner with big companies to solve challenges they have. And I'll give a recent example, and that's with Boeing. Boeing came to us and said, we've got some challenges. Now, I sit back and go, well, can't Boeing, address these challenges internally? Well, they obviously came to a conclusion that they needed a broader input to the challenges. They came to us. We went to the ecosystem with the challenge. We found 6 providers that we thought could help them, and they pitched to them, and then Boeing partnered with that innovation company. And again, that for me is that realisation, that maturity to say, I can't do this internally. I need to reach out. They reached out to government of all parties and a whole lot of people. There's a whole session in that about what role government plays and should we be seen and not heard and so on and so forth. But I think it's a really good model about how we should all work together and not be constrained about expectations of what our role or responsibility is, but develop new relationships moving forward.
Okay, I'm going to pause there and open for questions. Baden's like rocking in his chair. He's so ready. We might we'll run this microphone around. Maybe you ask a question, but then you have to ferry it to the next person.
I have to now, yeah? Thanks, Chris. And full disclosure, Chris is a former student of mine from ages ago. Not a good one. I want to double down on this trust conversation. And as individuals who are responsible for places and collections and communities of people, do you have a strategy for how you purposefully develop trust in your environments? Like, do you have a set of strategic interventions that are trust-building activities?
Lots of them. Everything from having very consistent rituals, knowing that every 2 weeks we have an opportunity for our community to get together over drinks for a Thursday evening. Or having, if you've got a big community, you've got the challenge of creating a feeling of intimacy amongst a lot of people. And so what we found works quite well is founder dinners, just a small group of founders who are all on the same journey, bringing them together for something as intimate as a dinner together. It's being empathetic to the fact that there are people in your community who are not the super social, gregarious founder types, and making spaces for them. So someone who won't come to the community drinks, for instance, would come to Journal Club where a new scientific article is discussed. And so it's about figuring out who your people are and creating experiences for them to find their people within the community as well. That's one way we think about it.
Yeah. Is it on? Look, I guess from the AI perspective, trust it has a different context. There was recently there's a survey done that was found that Australia has the lowest trust in AI than any other country in the world, or any other country that was surveyed, and I think there was quite a large number surveyed. So that's a real problem and something that we need to address. And I think innovation places have a real role to play in bringing in that a place which builds a culture of ethics and responsibility when it comes to AI, so that the Australian people, they're the customers for a lot of these products and services, or they're the shareholders of companies, and they're going to demand that any AI product or service is ethical and responsible. So I think by fostering that culture within these innovation places can really build that trust in the Australian community with AI.
Hi, Margaret from Young Change Agents. We're here with a cohort of 10 to 22-year-olds who are, and I'm not one of those, but I hear a lot from them about the issues that they want to see. We talk about the next generation of world-leading innovation. They're very passionate about climate change, mental health, disaster resilience, all of these issues. Tony, I was really interested, you talked about, we've been measuring innovation through job creation for a number of years now. When you're setting up the platform to power the next generation of world-leading innovation, how are you, open to the whole panel, but looking at what this next generation are looking at as world-leading innovation? And just because you mentioned that, Tony, so what's been your thinking around that?
Oh, I wish this was a Dorothy Dick, so I had a good answer for it. But look, I'll give it my best shot. I've got an interesting work history. So for the last couple of years before I came to this role, I actually worked for a small group in Queensland called the Queensland Family and Child Commission, and their remit is they look over the child safety and youth justice departments for systemic improvement. So our job was not to look at individual cases, but to see how the system was letting kids down. And we did that in a whole bunch of ways, but one of the key ways was through conversation. And I'm a massive believer in storytelling, and we haven't really touched on that today. But I think if we're going to be successful in any of these spaces, telling stories and effective stories is going to be really important to that. And part of effective storytelling is having the right audience. From a Queensland perspective right now, we're not engaging with young people enough, and that's something that will change. Over the next 6 to 12 months, we will engage with them. In what form? I couldn't tell you right now. We've got a whole bunch of youth advisory councils in Queensland that are formed under government. Whether they're the right forums or not, we'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, it's about picking an issue and making sure that we've got a cross-section of the community in the room so we can get representative views. I've got to say, I do get frustrated, and I went to an event not too long ago where they were talking about future issues and impacts on young people, and there wasn't anyone under 50 on the panel. And I'm going, really? Can anyone, and I wasn't on the panel for the record, can anyone speak with authority? Now, I'm a believer that you need a couple of more mature people there that can talk about their experience, but you've still got to have the young view in the room. So can I just round that out, though, the storytelling component? Why I think this is so important, if I think about AI, there would be some people out there, as soon as they hear the words AI, they would start to tremble. They would think of the Terminator movie and whatever. If we don't tell the story properly, we can do all we like in the technology side, and some will be adopted where people don't even understand what's behind it, and other parts will strike resistance. The beauty of storytelling is just getting the message across in a really effective way that people understand and they are more accepting. That's one side of it. The other side, and something we're really starting to push in Queensland, is getting our innovative companies to tell their story properly. I couldn't tell you how many sessions I've gone to where people are pitching for business, say to Boeing, and I'm sitting there a little bit cringing because it's a founder who's going to their place of comfort, which is talking super technical in a monotone way that it couldn't be more disengaging. With no disrespect to the person, if we don't help them get their message across, if we don't give them the feedback and the tools to be able to win business, from a government perspective, are we doing our jobs? Yeah, I think we have an obligation to get the community on side to accept innovation. We've got an obligation to make sure those innovators that have the opportunity to change things get the best opportunity to do that. And rounding back out, that includes young people, making sure they're part of the transaction.
I do just want to add maybe a provocation to that. Storytelling feels very one-sided. this is the story that we want the young people to know, or this is how we want to frame it for young people. So much of that is, and I'm oversimplifying what you're saying, I know.
I know, I'm saying hearing from the young people.
Oh, okay, that was going to be my point. Yes, is engaging with young people means listening to young people first and foremost. And I remember being young and very idealistic. I'm still a little bit idealistic and still a little bit young. But I had someone tell me that when I listen to you, I'm not hearing naivety, I'm hearing clarity. And that's what I think young people bring to conversations, is just cut through the bullshit, this is how it is. And so listening to young people, super important.
We might have maybe two more. Yeah, Matt?
Thanks, Chris. This is one for you to dip in on as well. I've been involved in multiple innovation precincts and run a business that has multiple tenants in one of those. And one of the challenges we have is around that industrial tourism piece. So Tony did a bit of a crossover around governments wanting these precincts to attract businesses and wanting to show it, but having those that are leading the businesses trying to grow it, just telling a story about why it's great to be there, but with no upside for the business itself. And we're constantly challenged by that balance. So I just wanted reflections on your thoughts on how you balance that industrial tourism, promoting precincts, providing places where this innovation happens, versus the ability to get on and get stuff done in those places to build businesses that matter.
Thank you, Matt. Well, no, look, I will give my own spin on this. So if I can give an example of the precinct we run in the Valley in Brisbane. So one of the things we use the precinct for is to showcase events, and we have a whole bunch of tenants in the precinct. So what those events do is provide an opportunity for the tenants to come and the tenants to collaborate. And we pick key topics, and that can be anything from AI to decarbonisation to whatever, and we work with industry, we have key speakers, we run mentoring sessions, etc. And it goes to that point earlier about providing opportunities for people to come together. In doing that, we have no expectation of the tenants per se moving things forward. That's still falling back on us. So when I say storytelling is dependent on the actor and their role in the ecosystem. And that goes from an owner selling a product to the government saying why we need to invest in innovation. Everyone has a different story to tell, and no one has the obligation or the responsibility to tell someone else's story. So when I say arm people with storytelling, I'm really talking about for their own purposes. And if I look at the precinct in the Valley, our job is about attracting people to it. We need to sell it, and we sell it by having those events. Hopefully that answers your question. I know it's not an exact answer, and it's a bit of a hard one because it depends on the precinct as well.
Yeah, well, Chris dips in. It's that we understand our role in helping you sell it, and I suppose it's how much we spend the time on that versus doing the doing. I was involved in setting up Tonsley in South Australia, and I employed someone full-time, one person. All they did was run tours and host government delegations. And that was important to generate interest in the precinct, but it didn't help my business grow.
Yeah, and does anyone ever feel like they're a bit of a tour guide in there? Yeah, we've got a couple. Like it's a real challenge, and I think it will persist, and probably one of the few reflections that's helped in our kind of various kind of iterations over the years has been trying to help mature, and different audiences take different times to get to a point, but trying to help mature the messaging and then the metrics, because for example, Lot 14, widely seen as quite a successful innovation precinct. But the first 2 or 3 years, the metrics that the politicians were in the paper every day talking about were, we've got 600 bums on seats, That's a fantastic reversive brain drain for our state. And so obviously all of the kind of flow-on activity becomes talking about this place as a physical place. And it's almost like every time that happens, you've got to do 10x over here in terms of innovation outcomes to kind of course correct. And so, for us, it's been a combination of trying to quickly, like at every point, get as many people reorientating the message towards ultimately commercial outcomes, future industries, all that good stuff, and then just managing the inevitable through more curated engagement. So it's like, you know, don't come for a tour, come and learn about, you know, and yeah, we'll see. I'll let you know how that goes. We've got time for maybe 2 more questions. 1 more question, actually. We've got right in the back corner. You can either yell it out or Matt will run you over a microphone.
Thank you. Is that working? Okay. The first is a comment, and I know that's annoying at conferences, but I just want to make a comment that the most successful innovation centre I've been to, and you'll have other examples, is the Texas Medical Centre. And there they particularly focus on medtech, devices, etc. But they're on campus with 5 or 6 teaching hospitals, and they're always pitching to the doctors and the practitioners, and they actually achieve commercial outcomes in months sometimes, but rarely looking at the 5 to 8 years. So my questions: do we ignore deep and radical tech that originates in the private sector and not through the CSIRO and the and government? And do we stick to state-based support when, if we didn't go Queensland, only Queenslanders, Victoria, only Queenslanders, we actually may set up a national network with centres of expertise around particular sectors and particular market opportunities?
Okay, I can start on the first question, which was, do we ignore what's happening in the private sector when it comes to deep technology? It's not that we ignore it, it's that I think deep technologies that are developed in the private sector have an easier route to market than technologies coming out of universities, because often they come out of laboratories or workshops that are owned by a company that can help distribute that technology. So they don't need to go through the same fundraising cycle as startups coming out of universities tend to do. And so it's not that we ignore them, it's just that we don't make that big a fuss about them because we don't need to raise their profile to raise funding for them. Private deep technologies, absolutely, I think, are interesting and useful and world-changing. We just don't see it that often. They still exist.
Sure.
Sure. I was just going to say as well, part of our role at the National AI Centre is actually to highlight some of the commercial AI businesses out there in Australia and companies out there in Australia, and make them known and make them being able to be found by those that are looking to purchase solutions. And we've done that. We've actually developed this ecosystem platform where any technology company doing AI in Australia can actually be listed on our CSIRO website, and we'll actually help try and promote them as well. So look, I think part of our remit is to actually highlight those. I'm not sure what was done in the past, but we're doing that now. So.
And I think that's probably a good comment to wrap on. I would just point out that's exactly why conferences like today happen. I'm sure many of you have met people from all around the world. I'm meeting people from cities I never even knew existed. And part of I guess what makes Gen so special, and certainly what Chad and some of the other organising committees are thinking about, is how do we, as ecosystem enablers, almost level up our thinking and become, platforms of platforms for opportunity. And so you'll see a little bit in the wrap-up notes tomorrow, and then in also some of the work that comes out of Gen moving forward, I guess opportunities to better coordinate in thinking bigger and mobilising our respective expertise to solve some of these, ultimately world's most pressing challenges. So I think great wrap-up point to end. And please join me without further ado in thanking our speakers today. Well done. Thank you. Very good.